Um, well, my name is Cyril. I'm going to. Yeah? Okay. Is this better? Okay. So, well, first of all, I want to thank Vikram, Sandhya, Advaita, Pratiti, everyone for making this happen. We just had a random communication and somehow this happened. Now I know that you are doing 50 of these events a month. That's a lot, I think. But okay, so without further ado, I'm going to get into this thing. The phone stopwatch thing doesn't really work, but I'll try to keep a thing. So the way I'm going to do this is please don't worry. It looks like I have 37 slides, but it's actually not going to be that long because there are lots of screenshots and I'm going to run through some of them. A lot of this stuff you already know, several of you at least, so it's going to be okay, I think. So, okay, one other thing. The thing I want to focus on today is actually about this. There's this idea that, oh, the Democratic Party has this particular coalition, like people who are racial minorities, younger people, women, and this is called the Obama coalition, or used to be called this. And then there's a worry, I think, within the Democratic Party that it's fragmenting, that this doesn't actually work anymore. Just because you're a racial minority or just because you're a woman, you're not necessarily going to be a Democrat. This is the thought. And I think it's true and it's not true, right? So that's one of the things I'm going to highlight. The other thing I want to say is going to be a little bit depressing, okay? I'm sorry, but it is. It's basically the idea that in the US, at least in my understanding, it is very hard to change people's minds. People think like they think their tribe ought to think. So it's very tribal, and that's the depressing note I'm going to end on, okay? So I'm sorry, it's a Wednesday, I know. Thank you for coming, by the way. It's like a weekday, and I'm sure every one of you is extremely busy. But we'll hopefully have. Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, so this is the talk. Is Demography Destiny? The first thing I'll start with is. Okay, so if the screenshot actually tells you what website it is from, then I haven't inserted a URL, but I have for the ones for which there is no. Am I too close to the mic? Is that what it is? Yeah. For the ones that you don't have this, I have put the URL. I'll also send the slides if you want to like access them and look at the links, that's fine. So this is 2020 data, right? So what happened in the last presidential election? So one of the most important things here is that you will see that this Biden got Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. Okay, this is a big deal. The upper Midwest is a big deal. If he loses the upper Midwest this time, he's probably going to lose the elections. Okay, this is something to observe. I'm having some trouble with this.
Just give us a second.
Okay. Sure thing. I think there's still a little bit of feed. Oh no, or no. Probably not. Yeah. So one of the things we see is that the East and the West and the upper Midwest, that is all Democrat. We have this ocean of red in the middle, the mountain states, the heartland, the deep South, right? This is the problem. Now, one thing to observe is that Georgia went blue last time, yeah? And the Southwest, Arizona, New Mexico, they went for Biden last time, but we don't quite know what's going to happen in the 2024 elections. Having said this, I'm going to show you from this website. It's called 270 to Win. They do projections and they show you polling data, etc. So they have projections for 2024. I'm going to show you something like this. So you see what's happening is that, well, the East Coast and the West Coast, they remain blue. The red states still remain red. The toss-up states are Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia. These are the states where it's going to make a difference, whatever difference is made, right? By my calculation, I'm not great at math, but my calculation is that if Biden is at 226 right now, he cannot lose Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, because if he gets those three, he's going to get to 270. I don't know that he's going to win Georgia again. I'm pretty sure he won't, but I'm not in the business of like prognostication. I don't do that. I'm not like some astrologer. We're political scientists. We say things after the fact. We analyze stuff after you've lost the election. We tell you why you did. Anyway, and Nevada, Arizona are tricky, and I'll get into the weeds a little bit later in the talk, but there is a Senate election in Arizona also. There's some push also to put an abortion referendum on the ballot. Now, those are X factors. Like, once you do things like that, then we have no idea what's going to happen. So I'm proceeding with the assumption that that we can't rely on Nevada, Arizona, and Georgia at all. Yeah? But more on this in a little bit. Okay, so just some basics for in my field. When we think about political participation, we actually think about like different types of participation. Like voting it's just one of the things, right? So we think of people joining political groups, writing to elected officials, demonstrating for political causes, giving money to political candidates, etc., etc. And if you look at U.S. persons or Americans, there are many Americas, but whatever. There's relatively low levels of voter participation, okay, but quite high levels of citizen participation in political and civic organizations. Lots of people giving money, lots of people joining organizations, etc. And one other data point, just to put things in perspective, is that in 2024, the number of eligible voters is 246 million, okay? It's kind of important to know this stuff because I will be talking about specific demographics and how many of those people exist. So that's why I've put it on the early on. Excuse me. Voter turnout, right? These are selected presidential elections, and there's a typo I see. It's driving me up the wall, but okay. But anyway, these are selected presidential elections. And there is a thought that says, oh, people are not voting. But not everyone votes. Well, there is a whole school of thought that says compulsory voting is a good thing. I think there are bad things about both compulsory voting and not compulsory voting. 2020, though, was huge. Like 66.8% people voted in 2020. People were really energized, right? And I've put in the 2022 data point because it was the midterm. It's off year. Like people don't come out to vote that much in midterm elections, but the 52.2% data point that you see for 2022, that is actually the second highest in the 21st century. So people did come out. You also, I think, have to keep in mind that this is right after the Dobbs decision, which is the overturning of the Roe decision, right? So there are lots going on. Okay. Voting obviously has historical exclusions, just you know this, but I'm just going to breeze through some of this stuff. There were property restrictions. You had to be a propertied white male in the beginning to vote. Gender, obviously, till the 19th Amendment, 1920. Race, obviously, literacy tests, poll taxes, grandfather clause, etc. Age, 18-year-olds couldn't vote in the US till the 26th Amendment. Until 1970, some states had very lengthy residence requirements, like you had to be a resident of that state for a very long time before you were actually you could register to vote. But these days, the maximum, and there's a Supreme Court ruling about this, I forget the case, I think it's 30 days is the max that they can ask you, right? And then in these days, the two big forms of disenfranchisement are, well, mass incarceration, which in some states, depending on the jurisdiction, triggers felon disenfranchisement. That's one thing. The other is voter ID laws. And voter ID laws affect disproportionately people who are, well, racial minorities, people who are less affluent, and people who are older, because older people often don't have the birth certificate and all the rest of it. They were born at home, and you need to have that to get the voter ID and so on and so forth. I should go back and say a few things about this. So major demographic variations in party affiliation, that's on the right. people say that, you want to look at people's race, ethnicity, gender identity, age, religion, income, correlated with education, type of residence, as in urban, suburban, or rural, region, if you're from the deep south, if you're from the west coast, etc., sexual orientation also. I'll mostly be focusing on race, gender, and age because that's the major Obama coalition thing. So, okay. Here's a screenshot just to show you that there is a wiki entry on the Obama coalition. It is a thing, right? And in it, I think there is something in it that is wrong, but that doesn't matter. I just mainly wanted you to see that there is such a thing as the Obama coalition. So what it says is that it is made up of racial, it's actually the end of the second line, racial minorities along with women and young voters. That is the coalition, right? And that's what I'm going to focus on mostly. The stuff about Jimmy Carter is wrong. And the wrong stuff on the wiki entry is drawn from this political piece, which is there's a screenshot from the political piece, but this says, Obama won in all regions in the country, but to the deep south, piling up big wins, etc., deep inroads into the new south states. And then the next paragraph, most spectacularly, he found victory with a multiracial coalition that has the makings of a formidable political base of power. And this was the received wisdom for a very long time. And I think they're now nervous, the Dems are now nervous that this is no longer the case, right? That's what we're going to look at. And then at the end, the last paragraph, they talk about made up of all ethnicities, hailing mostly from cities and suburbs, largely younger than 40 years old, and among all income classes. That's the other big data point. Okay, so let's look at some of these, yeah? So among racial minorities, and today is Juneteenth, by the way, in the US. It's the commemoration, yes. So it's I think, a grim and a happy day. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that. So these are eligible voters in the US projected for 2024, and you see the rise, right? The change in the sheer numbers. So among Hispanics, we have 36 million people who are going to be able to vote. Now, not everyone does, but for Black Americans, it's 34.4 million. For Asian Americans, it's like 15 million, right? But the total number of people who are eligible to vote is 246 million. So you have to keep this in mind, I think. I'm going to say a few things about each one of these demographics. So for Black Americans, there is apparently no class divide, which is very often the case for most other racial groups and ethnic groups. But blacks vote as a bloc, particularly black women, right? Support for the Democratic Party is basically locked in, which is a problem, because if you do that, then the Dems really don't have to do anything for black women, right? Because the vote is locked in. So it's tricky, but it is the case that vote is locked in for the Dems, I think. They frequently vote as a bloc. They've supported the Democratic Party since the Civil Rights era, right? I mean, the Republican Party is, and we were talking about this, is the party of Lincoln, but since the Civil Rights era, the Democratic Party, because it has been in support of civil rights, it basically, Black Americans don't forget that. There's a long memory for it. They are socially conservative, right? And quite religious, this demographic. I said something about black women. There is a newish trend among particularly male black voters of weakening support for the Democrats, right? They also have a historical affiliation with Arab Americans. And this is very important because there is a critical mass of black voters who live in Michigan, and Michigan has about 200,000 Arab Americans. And they are in solidarity, and I'm going to say more on this in a little bit when I talk about Palestine. So they constitute about 14% of all eligible voters, but the other thing, half of this demographic lives in these states: Texas, Georgia, Florida, New York, California, North Carolina, Maryland, and Illinois. Only two, I think, are actually in play, right? Georgia, I actually don't think Georgia's in play, but whatever, Georgia's in play. Yeah, that's it. Florida, maybe, yeah? The rest of it, is locked in, right? We know how they're going to vote, whether they're going to vote Democrat or Republican. Among Latinos or Hispanic Americans and Latinx people, but I'm now told that there's a critique of the use of the word Latinx, so I'm nervous about using it. But anyway, there's 36.2 million eligible voters, up from 16 million in 2004. That's 20 years, right? It's more than doubled. Yeah, tend to be socially conservative, often Catholic. But anti-abortion, I'm not sure. It's a bit tricky. I think it depends, right? There are 14.7% of the electorate, and about a quarter of them live in California. I don't know why I have this New Mexico data point, but it's there. There are 45% of New Mexico's voters, right? It's the highest proportion. 53% of Latino Americans are eligible to vote, and only, and this is important, a third of them are 50 or older. That means it's a pretty young demographic, right? Compare this to all US voters, 48% of whom are above 50, right? 1/5 of Latinos say that they're currently leaning toward a third-party candidate. Yeah? So Robert F. Kennedy or Jill Stein or someone. That's the other X factor in this election. We don't know what this means. So the support, I should talk about Democratic support. In 2008, 67% voted for the Democratic Party. 2012, 71%. It actually went up for the second Obama term, right? 2016, it came back down to 66, and the 2020 data, it's mixed up. I've seen different polls saying different things. So they're somewhere between 60 and 65, right? Is there reason to panic that they're not going to support Democrats? Maybe there is. I'll show you some polling data in a little bit. Asian Americans, right? Very mixed up group, but mostly Democrat. So we have 15 million. They're about 6.1% of all eligible voters. 55% live in California. 31% of California is Asian American, right? And 55% live in California, New York, Texas, Hawaii, and New Jersey. Observe, none of this is in play. Not one of them is a swing state, right? The older you are, so 42% of the foreign-born Asian Americans who have lived in the US for more than 20 years, they tend to be Republican, right? Something to observe. Indian Americans, really interesting stuff, I think. So 11 years ago, in 2013, we had one member of Congress in the House of Representatives, fewer than 10 in state legislatures, none in the Senate. There was no Indian senator, and there had been no presidential bids, right? But in the current Congress now, last year and now, there are 5 members of Congress, including Pramila Jayapal. There are nearly 50 Indian Americans who serve in state legislatures. The vice president is Indian American and Black American. There have been presidential bids from Kamala Harris, Nikki Haley, Vivek Ramaswamy, right? 2 people have served as the principal deputy solicitor general. That's Sri Srinivasan and Neil Katyal. Neil Katyal actually also served as the acting solicitor general for a brief period. And Vivek Murthy, who's in the news now because he wants this social media, this thing alert that it's bad for teenagers, etc. He's the surgeon general, right? Among Asian Americans, not everyone is the same, obviously. So you look at the support for the Democratic Party on the right. The Chinese are at 56%, Filipinos at 68%, Indians are at 68%. Indians are weird, though. Indians are super weird because it's the richest ethnic group in the country, super socially conservative, and Democrat. You wouldn't expect this, but this is what, we are like this only. Right? It's like, and the Koreans are at 67%, the Vietnamese are at 42%. The Vietnamese, for obvious reasons, are not so interested in the Democratic Party. And then there's data points on the side. I don't want to belabor those, but women tend to be more liberal than men, less interested in military involvement, more interested in things like social spending. But this group is tricky because it intersects in very important ways with race and with type of residence, whether or not you're a suburban woman. That also matters quite a bit, especially if you're college educated. That's the other thing I want to talk about a little bit. So in 2019, there's one poll says 56% of men agreed that the US had grown believe it or not, too soft and feminine, while only 34% of women said this. And then you look at the key data point, which is that among non-college educated women, only among Democrats, only 28% said, yes, it's grown soft and feminine, while among Republicans it was 57%. But now, if you look at the college educated Democrat women, only 4% said that the US has become too soft and feminine. And this is something I think the Democratic Party needs to understand, and they do, or they're getting to understand, that this college-educated business is super important. That is the big new divide. I will say more on this in a little bit. As opposed to 57% of Republican women who are college-educated. 57%. College-educated Republican women think that the country is too soft and feminine, right? So I don't think it's women. I think it's college-educated versus non-college educated women. That's the thing, the gender gap. Anyway, more on this in a little bit. Age. Younger people tend to be more socially progressive. Older voters tend to identify more with parties, while younger voters tend to lean more toward a party. 52% of voters who are below the age of 25 say they identify with a party, and 38% of them are Democrat, while 14% are Republican. But here's the thing. In the late 90s, there was actually not that much variation. This is new, right? These days, younger voters tend to lean more Democrat. And since the Obama coalition years, we've assumed that if you're young, you're going to be dead. But it's looking very tricky now. White, Hispanic, and Asian older voters are more likely to be Republican than their younger counterparts. But if you look at the Black community, it is very different. It's actually the reverse. So among Black voters, 17% of those who are below the age of 50 identify as or are lean Republican. Among those who are older than 50, only 7% are Republican. So it's the reverse. It's the reverse relationship as all the other racial demographics, right? So older Black Americans, many of whom have a historical memory of the civil rights era, they know, they remember, they saw their parents, they were young, all of those people, they tend to be Democrat. Young Black men particularly are now saying, well, and there's multiple reasons for this, lots of people. Some people advance the theory that, I think some young Black men want to signal that they want to be tough on crime, right? And that makes them feel like, aligning with the Republican Party is going to signal that. And I'm not sure that it does, but, it might be some people's thinking. Other people might want to signal that I want to be tough and more masculine, that the country should be stronger, whatever. Not to mention the way we recruit people to join the military. We go and stand in front of high schools, and we stand in front of Home Depot or Walmart, and we recruit. The people who really die when we go to war are young men, right? Often less affluent and often racial minorities. So if you're part of the military, it's not surprising to me that you're becoming more sort of conservative or Republican. So there's also that. It's overdetermined. There's many things going on, right? Okay, here's something about age, just some fancy, I don't even understand this. But I do understand one thing. So if you look to the right, look at 2023 data, and you will see that that's the key part, right? When you look at Black Americans and their support for the Republican Party, the black dot, which says 7%, that's 50 or older. The brown or beige or whatever color that is younger people, 17%, right? But what is interesting is that's the reverse relationship to everyone else. All the others, the colors are laterally inverted, right? That's what is going on. More on this. This is the 2020 presidential elections data. I don't know if it is, okay, I'll just breeze through this stuff. So, this is from the Times, the New York Times, and if you look at men, 45% voted Democrat. Among women, 57% voted Democrat. If you're white, 41%. If you were Black, 87%. If you're Hispanic Latino, 65%, Asian, 61%, and other demographics, 55%, right? Marital status, if you're married, you're more likely to be Republican. If you are single, 58% of you are voting Democrat. If you're a gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender, then your support for the Democratic Party is at 64%, and so on and so forth. If you're white evangelical or born-again Christian, then 76% of you are voting for the Republican Party, right? The richer you are, the more conservative you are, generally, right? This is what I was saying about the Black community. There is no class divide, but here you can see if you make $100,000 or more, 54% of you are voting for the Republican Party. This is the way the split occurs. I think this is the last slide on the 2020 elections. Region, we've talked about this. If you're from the East Coast or the West Coast, you're very likely to be Democrat, 58% and 57%. What kind of place do you live in, the type of residence? This to me is very interesting because 60% of urban voters voted for the Democratic Party. That's not counterintuitive. What is, though, is the suburban vote. So the 2020 suburban vote split quite evenly. So you have 48% and 50% for the Democrats. So Biden actually carried the suburban vote, which is super interesting. Some other key things to observe about 2020 is that over 150 million people voted. It's the highest rates in more than 120 years. 74 million voted for Biden, 70 million voted for Trump. The gender gap didn't pan out quite as much as polling said it would. Latinos moved either toward Biden or toward Trump, depending on the state. They didn't move as a group. So it actually mattered where they lived and what kind of ethnic group or national origin they come from, Venezuelan, Cuban, and so on and so forth. There also was a major gender gap among Latinos. In some battleground states, the gap was up to 26 percentage points. It's kind of startling, actually. Young people, though, voted in droves for Biden, like 61% or something. Older people remained steadily in favor of Trump, but by a smaller margin than before. And among first-time voters, if you were slightly older, like 30 to 44, then 67% of those people voted for Trump. But if you were 29 and under, Biden carried, not by a huge majority, but 53% of that group voted for Biden. And the major issues, and this, I think, that right now, this is very interesting to me, the major issues at that time were race, COVID, the economy, climate change, not immigration. And this is going to be interesting this year because Biden is now in the middle of two different types of immigration policy, right? One is related to asylum, the other is related to unauthorized migrants who are spouses of US citizens. And this is in the news, which I'm having trouble looking at because I'm in India. I'm like seeing friends and it's hard to watch the news, but yeah. Anyway, okay. So this is what I call a panic attack, okay? These are little screenshots of news stories. First, we'll do 2020, then we'll move on to 2024, yeah? 2020, here is a panic attack from CNN, and they're like, oh, look at the Latino vote in Florida. You know, Trump captured half the group, up from 35%. And Biden lost support in all sorts of places, like except Arizona. And at the bottom of this, the last paragraph, it says, you know, in Arizona, Latino voters favored Biden by nearly 2-1. But, and I'm going to not belabor the slide, I'm going to just tell you, here's what happened. In the Rio Grande Valley in Texas, in southern Texas, Latino Americans voted for Trump. All of them, basically. The Florida voters, two demographics, Venezuelans, Cubans, voted for Trump. But if you look at Latinos in New York, they're not voting for Trump. If you look at New Yorkers or Puerto Ricans who live in New York, they're not voting for Trump. So we can no longer say that Latinos vote in this way. It's totally fragmented. We have no idea who's going to vote how. The region matters, and the specific ecosystem or tribe or that they're embedded in or community, that actually matters, right? Okay. Okay, I'm going to move on from that. This is mostly that. Yeah, I'm just moving on. 2024. The major discussions now are these three, okay, or at least in the stuff I'm talking about. So the first thing is younger people, and this is also my students, like the 18 to 22 aged group, they speak like this. They're like, oh, they're both too old. I'm not sure I want to vote for either one of them. And maybe they're going to vote for Jill Stein. Maybe they're going to go with Robert Kennedy Jr. We don't know. But there is a concern that younger people think that the two candidates are both too old to effectively run the country, right? Even if they don't vote for a third party candidate, if they just stay at home, that's a Trump vote. If they don't actually step out of their house, it is actually a Trump vote. And I don't want to get into the weeds of this, but just trust me, it is. Right? If you don't vote for Biden, then you're voting for Trump. That's what it is. Among blacks, Hispanics, and Arabs, the support for the Democratic Party is actually weakening. We know this. The data tells us this. But I think it is silly to say that, to use words like blacks, Hispanics, and Arabs, because there's so much variation within any of these subgroups. The other one, and this is X factor number 3, abortion. We have absolutely no idea what's going to happen. So the question is, will abortion become like a pivotal issue, and particularly for suburban and or college-educated women? And we don't know. What we do know is that since the Dobbs decision, I think there are 7 states that had something to do with abortion on the ballot, and every one of them has gone in the what is colloquially called a pro-choice direction, right? In Florida, which is definitely a red state, 100% a red state. Some people will try to tell you it's a purple state. I don't believe it's definitely a red state, but abortion is actually on the ballot, right? And we have no idea. And they're thinking about literally how to linguistically frame the question on the referendum to make sure that pro-Trump people actually are not pissed off at the language, and to just get moderates to come along, right? So they're working on this, and in Arizona there's some talk that they'll put abortion on the ballot again. So we have no idea what's going to. So any of you who thinks that I'm going to tell you what's going to happen in the 2024 election, you'll be very, very disappointed. Nobody knows, right? Stay miles away from anyone who tells you that they know. I don't think anyone does. It is impossible to know. Next thing. The Democratic Party's this is from Gallup, right? So the URL is down there. The Democratic Party's wide lead over Republicans and Black Americans has shrunk by nearly 20 points, Gallup is telling us. Among Hispanic adults and adults aged 18 to 29, the slide has been nearly as much, but the Democrats are holding on with a modest edge. The next bullet point, Democrats and Republicans among men, they had parity in 2009. And among non-college educated adults, even as recently as 2019. But the Dems are in the red with both groups now, right? So it's really not looking good. Then there is this. This is from Al Jazeera. I just have a screenshot of the title of the article. So what happened is the Michigan primaries, there was an option to say I'm voting uncommitted. And 100,000 people voted in the Michigan Democratic primary saying I'm uncommitted. That was a signal to the Biden administration that if you do nothing about the Gaza Strip, we're not going to come out in November to vote for you. So this is very risky for the Biden administration. The optics are terrible, and they can't win. Like, they literally cannot win on the Israel issue, right? And that is not just Arab Americans. There's about 200,000 who live. It's not going to change the election, but it will change Michigan. And if it changes Michigan, that's going to change the election, right? That's the problem. If it were just Arab Americans, it would be one thing. But Black Americans in the Detroit area and in the Dearborn area, which is right next to it, are in solidarity with the Arabs. And they're saying, we're going to go and we're going to not vote for Biden in the primary, right? So we'll see what happens, but there is this. This is also Black voters, supporting Trump in record numbers. It's men, by the way. This is just all men. This is Fox News saying a new poll finds that Biden's support among Black voters has dropped 20 points in the key states of Pennsylvania and Michigan. Right? Those are big ticket items, right? and on, more panic attack about Biden. Trump leads Biden among young people. Young people want other options. Among all Americans, about half, or 47% of registered voters in CNN's poll, say that they were satisfied. But if you ask younger people, only 37% of them said they were satisfied with the two candidates. So the idea is that, okay, we're losing racial minorities, we're losing young people. And with women, it's tricky. We don't know what's going to happen if abortion's on the ballot. So let's look at the data, and let's also look at the time. I don't want to be talking forever. This is data from the Gallup poll, right? How Americans say they lean. So you look at the Black support, Hispanic support, they've all gone down quite dramatically, actually. That is true, but I think there is internal variation. I've now said this many times, but look at the stuff for white people. In 2008, 2009, there was a convergence. There were some years when there was more white people supported the Democratic Party in higher number. Than there were for the Republican Party. But since then, it's diverged. And right now, 54% of all white people support the Democratic Party. And if you look at whites as a group, 38% of them support the Democratic Party. But then there's a class variation there too. But, moving on, young voters, there's a lot there. But I think what I think is important is that the margins, right? So if you look at the margins for 18 to 29, and this is not just presidential election years. 2018 was a midterm election, 2020 was a presidential election, 2022 were midterms again. So it really looks at the weeds of this, right? So if you look at the margins on for 18 to 29 for 2018, the Democrats had a 49-point lead, 49. But something happened, and I don't know what. Between 2018 and 2020, the support went down from 49% to 26%. Not percent, the vote margin went down from 49 to 26, and I have no idea what happened. And if you know, you should tell me, because I'm interested to know. It's since then come back up in 2022, but 2022 is post-Dobbs. Young people went back up, but not up to 2018 levels. So the margin or the lead is 37 points. Yeah? So that, to me, is quite interesting. And gender, okay, once again, I think we should look at the margins. If you look at all women across racial groups, the data tells us from 1980 to 2022. Oh no, that's not what that is. This is 2020 data, right? So this is 2020 data. On the right, you will see the top one. There are three different polls, and women. There is a 15-point or 12-point margin lead that they lean Democrat, right? All women. You look at white women, which is the next one, and you see it plummets. Some polls, it's only single digits, like 5-point lead or 8-point lead, right? But when you look at women who are racial minorities, it changes again. Look at black women, the margin is 81 points. According in one poll says it's 88 points, right? That's the lead for the Democratic Party. So black women are actually not changing so much. So if there is any change among black Americans, it's all men, right? And with Latinas also, you see the margins are 39, 34, 37, 50 in one poll. But none of this shows up among white women, right? White women are, I actually don't think there is a gender gap for white women. I really don't. I mean, there might be one, but it's weak. Okay, and I think I'm getting to the last part of the talk, but before that, one last thing. Here's what I think matters. I think college matters. Okay, and I say this because I think the big divide in the US now is whether or not you have a college education. So if you look at this slide, you will see that Look at the vote margins for 2018. If you had a postgraduate degree, you were 38 points. There was a 38-point lead for the Democrats, right? Which stays steady through 2020, but it goes down a bit in 2022, right? And then if you look down there, for Black Americans, actually it doesn't make much of a difference whether you have a college degree. That's true of 2018, that's true of 2020, that's true of 2020. That's true of 2022 as well. So if you have a college degree, there's an 83-point lead. If you don't have a college degree, it's 88-point lead. But it is not the case with whites. If you look at whites, the college degree actually matters. That's the thing that tells you whether or not a person is going to be supporting the Democratic Party. So I don't think we can any longer speak of entire racial groups or entire age demographics. I think we have to understand intersecting identities, like what are you suburban? Are you college educated? Are you Black identified? Then we can make a projection about how you're going to vote. So what's the story? The story is, and I promised you that I'm going to end with something depressing, yeah? So the depressing thing is this. So Dan Kahan, who's at Yale, did this study with some other people, and this was reported in Vox. Ezra Klein did the interview. This is 10 years old now. It's from 2014, but it's still relevant. I teach this. I talk to my students about this. It's like, so when he says politics makes us stupid, he says that, well, if you run experiments, if you do studies about how people think, how cognition happens, about especially stuff related to ideology, people stop thinking. People can't process stuff. And the example, this one, is actually, this is a study they did where they gave people this 2x2 matrix, and they said, okay, here's a study. Some patients used this skin cream, and those who did, some of them, the rash got better. For others, the rash got worse. For other patients who did not use the skin cream, for some of them the rash got better, for others the rash got worse. It turns out if you're good at math, then you actually know, you can work out whether or not you should be using this cream. If you're not good at math, but you're good at logic, you at least know that you have to calculate the ratios. Okay? I'm not good at math, so I knew that I had to just calculate the ratios. For those of you who are like me, let me tell you, this actually tells us you shouldn't be using the cream. Okay? The rash, your chances really don't go up that much if you do use the cream. Okay? But whatever it is, you at least know that you have to calculate the ratios. People who are good at math, they can actually work out down to the exact data point, right? But here's the thing. When it is skin cream, people can work this out. But the same people can't compute the stuff when the data is not about skin cream and rash, but about something political, let's say guns. Yeah? Once you change the thing, the content of the thing, the mind just freezes. Like you literally cannot think. Like people become, there is no other way to say this, stupider. Yeah, that's what happens to all of us. Right? And it's absolutely fascinating stuff. So those with math skills, they process this information better, but not when the topic is political, say gun control. Then there's a different experiment they ran. They gave sample biographies of highly accomplished scientists with a summary of the findings of the scientists. They gave the people like this stuff. Then the participants were asked if they think this scientist is an expert. It turns out the perceptions actually vary with ideology. People's actual definition of an expert is this depressing thing, the last quote. It's a credentialed person who agrees with me. So if whatever they have found out is something I like, if it is in agreement with me, then I self-report as saying this person is an expert. They're all experts. The study was actually about all experts. These are all famous scientists. But if I don't like what you say, I'm unlikely to think that you are an expert. That's what's going on. And then he goes on to say things like, so what's the story? Well, the story is this, and I'm going to end with this. I think in the US, we live in a world of like algorithms and ecosystems and tribes, So we don't see anything like, for all the talk, the liberal talk of like diversity, open up your minds and expand your horizons. Nobody does it. We literally don't do it. We live within bubbles. We talk to only like-minded people. We get irritated when we hear an opinion that we don't like. And we create a world in which we don't even have to encounter this stuff. Okay? And one of the ways in which we do that is by residential segregation. If that's the last point, I will end with that. But before that, I want to say two things. One, there is a thing called identity protective cognition. Your cognition is dependent on or is protective of your own identity, your tribe's identity. If you're looking at something that makes you feel like, oh, I can't be saying that, I can't be agreeing to that, because what will I tell my friends? My friends are going to be appalled to hear that I agree with that. So even if it looks like it's factual or it makes sense or it's logical, you avoid it. You kind of the brain stops working, right? So you protect your identity. I can't possibly be saying something against climate change, for example, right? So things like this, we do this all the time. So that's one problem. Oh, there's the other thing. And I'm just going to riff a little bit. It's not on the slide. So Cass Sunstein has this stuff on echo chambers, it's really fascinating stuff. These studies say that, if someone walks into the room and you look at them and you're like, wow, I think I know what they're going to say, you stop listening. If your assumption is this person is going to be Republican, you just stop listening. If your assumption is this person is a Democrat, you stop listening. We only listen when we look at a person, assume that they're going to say something, and then they say something that's not what you expected them to say. So if a black person comes into the room and starts saying something against affirmative action, that's when we listen. Right? So if a woman comes into the room and endorses like heteropatriarchy, that's when we're listening. The rest of the time we're tuned out. We're just not listening. Like even if it's something that's our own, like my people are talking, we're just not listening. That's what actually happens. Yeah. So partisanship also short circuits intelligence. I've talked about this. And the last thing is this. This is, I think, the biggest problem in the US. Voluntary residential segregation. We all moved to places where we are with like-minded individuals. Like liberals and progressives move to liberal and progressive zip codes. Republicans move to Republican zip codes. Conservatives in California are now moving to places like Arizona and other places that like California is too liberal for me. We do this all the time. Most of us live in a congressional, and I live in like one of the bluest districts in the country, right? And it's not by choice, but that's a separate matter. But we do this. We voluntarily move. So New Jersey is a pretty blue state, and several of you know that. But within New Jersey, a close friend of mine moved from Madison, New Jersey to Montclair, New Jersey. Montclair, for those of you who don't know, is much more liberal than Madison. So within the blue state, we move toward more and more people. We make all kinds of excuses. We say it's about the school district. I like that. My kid needs to go to that school. But of course, so anyway, I'll end with this. The idea that school districts are going to be related to property, that's one problem, which is what we do in the US. And the other problem is when we voluntarily move to places, there are no swing districts in the US. I mean, there's like 5. It's more than 5. I'm being facetious, but there are hardly any swing districts. Most of the districts are red or solidly blue. If you end up with that, of course you're going to have this kind of partisan polarization in Congress. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense for you to expect something different. And then you're complaining that, oh, people are bitterly divided. Well, yeah, you're the reason why they're bitterly divided. Move to a swing district where your vote actually matters. But we won't do it. I'm that person. I won't do it. So this, I think, is the problem. And I think that because we live in tribes, black women are classic case in point, just unwavering support. Among black men, I think the men who are saying, I want to be tough on crime, are in communities where other black men are also saying those things. The progressive black men don't talk to these black men. So these are little pockets, right? So we have absolutely no idea, I think, what's going to happen in 2024 with this demographic shift. But I do think college matters. It's clear from the data to me. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to stop talking and we'll do questions. Yeah, that's, I think, the better part of this thing for me anyway. All right. So, Sandhya, can I get your help with the facilitation, or will I just call on people? You do that, yeah? Thanks. No, I'm fine.
I think I'll just speak without the mic.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, because you're recording it.
All right.
Yeah.
So thanks for the talk. My question is, do you think the recent convictions, Trump on one hand and Hunter Biden on the other, is going to significantly affect how these demographies vote? Or do you think it'll just play out like, for example, gun control? Thanks.
On gun control. Okay, so here's the thing. First of all, if someone tells you that Trump is a convicted felon, please tell them he's not. I've recently learned this. I've recently learned that he's not going to be a felon until the sentence is actually entered. And the sentence won't be entered until the judgment is entered. And the judgment won't be entered until the sentencing is done, and that's on July 11th. So on June 27th, when they do the presidential debate, it's not clear to me. The guy's not a convicted felon, but he's been convicted. It's like, okay, so he's going to be up there, not a convicted felon, but somehow convicted. Will it make a difference? I don't know. I'm not an astrologer. I don't think, oh yes, actually I am. It will make a difference for one demographic only. So there is a lot of talk on the Trump side. The Hunter Biden side, I'm not sure that it's going to make that much of a difference. I don't think Americans care about Hunter Biden that much. I do think on the Trump issue, there is a small, very small, sub-demographic of Republicans that don't like Trump, but will vote for Trump, like they'll hold their nose and vote for Trump. Yeah? And among that, there is a critical mass of that group that's going to say, I can't do it. This guy's a criminal. I don't think they're going to come out and vote for Biden. My feeling is they're going to stay at home on the day off. They're going to say, I can't vote for a Democrat, but I can't also, this guy is just like, no. I can't try to put into the White House someone who is a criminal, is a felon, right? So will it make a difference? I don't know the sheer numbers, but it is the case that we know this because they say this. There is a group of people who publicly say when they are asked that I can't do it, not after this. Will it change the election outcome? I don't know, right? And about Hunter Biden, I don't know that it's going to make that much of a difference. I really don't think so. I do think that black men have started saying things like, if these rich white guys are, and so it cuts both ways, right? So the one group says that, oh wow, if these rich white guys are getting convicted, are found guilty, I don't stand a chance with this criminal justice system, right? So that's one take. There is a different take that says that, oh, the criminal justice system is not that bad after all. Like, these elite, rich white people also get convicted. So it's not clear what's happening. One group is saying this. So you're looking at this, it's the Rashomon effect, right? You're looking at the same thing and coming to different conclusions. So, yeah, I don't know if I've answered your question, but that's all you're getting from me. Yeah.
Hi, thank you for the talk. My question is surrounding the Palestine protests in universities. So how is the young college-educated demographic going to vote, considering that most of them that support the protests are liberal, but they tend to be in opposition of Biden, obviously. So would they vote for a third candidate, or would they abstain from the election? Yeah. And my second question was an observation I made. Like, from a gender study lens, I thought that one of the opinion questions on whether US is becoming more feminine and soft was very interesting. So I don't understand the rationale behind the question. So
Okay, so let me do the second one first, because that's easier. So it's just a polling question, right? People are asked, well, do you think the country has become soft and feminine, as in we haven't been aggressively militaristic? We've let other people become dominant with our trade negotiations and other kinds of things like this. But mostly it's rhetorical. That we are not what we used to be, or at least what we thought we would be when the Cold War ended, right? Or in the domain of immigration, it's like we just let anyone in. It's literally they are penetrating us, right? It's not literally, I mean metaphorically, but you get the drift. If you're supposed to be more masculine and virile, you're supposed to be enforcing your border somehow more virulently, right? This is the idea. So that's why that question, yeah? But your first one is, I can't answer, because we have no idea. We have no idea, zero idea. If my students are listening to me, they are going to understand that if they don't vote for Biden, then Trump will win. The inauguration is going to be on January 20th. And Justice Alito and Justice Thomas are going to step off the court on January 21st, and Trump is going to put two very young, very conservative people in office. And that's the right thing to do. I would do that. So I'm telling my students that if you're a Democrat, you should vote for Biden. And if you're a Trump supporter, you should vote for Trump. But it doesn't make sense to vote for, if you care about this stuff, and you may not, and that's your business. But if you care about this stuff, you shouldn't be doing this. But there's so many X factors. Robert Kennedy Jr., Jill Stein, they're going to get some votes, for sure, from young people. Some young people happen to do the following. They talk more than they do. Yeah? So there is a non-zero, it's a critical mass of young people who are just going to stay at home and wildly bitch and moan on social media, right? That's probably what's going to happen with the critical mass of them. And some people will say, yeah, no, okay. And especially college women, if abortion's on the ballot, they'll go out and vote, I think. So it depends on the sub-demographic. I can't say anything. I certainly cannot prognosticate about all college students or college. Yeah, I just can't do it. Different young people will do different things, but it's just wildly scattered right now. So, yeah.
I guess I'm sort of clutching at straws right now, Cyril, after listening to you. But can we necessarily equate being pro-Republican with being pro-Trump?
No.
I mean, isn't it possible that people will put in a Republican Senate, maybe even a Republican House, but a Democratic president?
It's very likely, actually. Very, very likely. The Senate is probably going to go Republican. It's not looking good so there are three key Senate races. One is Sherrod Brown in Ohio, and we don't know. It's going to go Republican, I think. He's going to lose. John Tester in Montana is probably going to lose. Sam Brown in Nevada, Trump just backed him, so we don't know what's going to happen with that. That's the incumbent is, what's her name now? I'm forgetting, Rosen, I think. Jackie Rosen, I think. Maybe she'll lose, and then Kristen Sinema, who's independent in Arizona, she's stepping down, so it's a free-for-all. So we have no idea. The Senate is probably going to go Republican. So I think even if Biden wins, which is a real toss-up right now, I think we're going to have divided government. I think we'll have split ticket voting. I think people will, in many places, and I think that there is a great chance that it's a Biden White House with a Republican, both Congress and Senate. Yeah. I'm not endorsing it. I'm just saying that it's very, very likely that that's going to happen.
Hi. I don't really have too many analysis points or anything. I guess more ignorant about things than I. Okay. Why is there a Black and Arab American solidarity? I mean, what basis of solidarity is there? Why are Hispanics in general anti-abortion? Like you mentioned, apparently they're not like that more this thing. And thirdly, it was very strange to not hear Steve Bannon be mentioned at all, especially if we're discussing like, because that seems to be a real like fracturing point on the Republicans, like a very real fracturing point for many Republicans. That I mean, I'm sure this is a little difficult even for me to come to terms with. But the Republicans also seem extremely divided. If you go to their like forums and such, they don't seem to be doing. Their audiences aren't doing as well as they were. Is my point. So anyway, question one: why Black American Arab solidarity?
I know. I remember the question.
Okay, great, great.
So the first one is why Black Americans. The second one is Latinos and abortion, and the third one Steve Bannon. Yeah. Okay. So let's do this in order. So the Palestinian solidarity thing goes back to the civil rights movement. It's the idea that you are oppressed, you're stateless. We've had a historical legacy of enslavement and the denial of personhood and all the rest of it. So there's a historical legacy of this. So lots of Black Americans became Muslim in the 20th century, Nation of Islam, all that sort of thing. So this is not just like a 5-minute affair, right? So there is a long historical tradition of this. So that's the first thing. Abortion Latinos, it's not abortion Latinos, it's abortion Catholicism. Yeah. So, and by the way, I didn't say that Latinos are anti or for abortion. I put a question mark next to it for a reason. Because Puerto Ricans, for example, are both, some are Protestant, some are Catholic. And if you're Catholic, you tend to be anti-abortion, but you tend to be humane. So it's kind of like the idea that right now the Supreme Court is going to issue an opinion in the EMTALA case at the end of this month or between now and then. It's about whether or not a woman has to prove that she's dying before she can be given emergency treatment. That E in EMTALA stands for emergency. I forget it's I think Emergency Maternity and Labor Act or whatever. It's a federal statute that says that a hospital, in order to have Medicare or Medicare funds sent to it, have to, by law, save the life of a woman if her life is in danger, pregnancy-related cases, or if her health is at grave risk, they need to attend to it. And if that entails the termination of a pregnancy, it's fine. Except states like Idaho say, nope, it's not fine. You have to prove to me that you're on death's door before we let you do this, before we actually save your, help you or terminate the pregnancy. So there's some reports of women being medevaced out of Idaho, and the court is now issuing an opinion on whether this is permissible under the law. So that's going to happen in the next 4 or 5 between now and the end of June, basically, next 11 days. So why am I saying this? But Latinos, it's Catholicism. So this humaneness question also matters, right? So if you're Catholic, it's a bit tricky. I just don't know. I've never seen any clear data point that Latinos are anti-abortion. I think the Catholicism intersects in very unusual ways with that. So it's not clear to me that we can say. So for Black Americans, for example, against same-sex marriage in the beginning, and then for same-sex marriage after the NAACP and the Obama administration come out and say, yes, we're in favor of this. We've evolved. It almost overnight changed. So the fact that these demographic blocks have social conservatism, or they're embedded in social conservatism, is not predictive of what's going to happen or how they're going to actually vote. So that's what is going on with Latino Americans, I think. And any people that has been oppressed sort of aligns itself. They get it, They know what oppression looks like. Bannon, I am not sure Bannon is like a big deal. It could be, I could be wrong, but I think the bigger deal is Stephen Miller. I think the bigger deal is Russ Voigt. I think the bigger deal is the Heritage Foundation Project 2025. Those are the big things. I don't think anyone is going to either vote for or against the Republican Party because of Steve Bannon. But it's possible that I'm wrong. So you may be reading something that I'm not reading. I just don't know enough about this. I do think Bannon's kind of like Alex Jones. I mean, it's only on the news. Like if you talk to an ordinary person, I don't think they're going to say, oh my God, Steve Bannon, I'm not going to. No. I've just never seen that. It's just never, it's not even on my radar as like as a make or break for the Republican Party, Yeah.
Professor, I gather from your talk that Americans are going to vote depending on race. The Latinos will vote this way, blacks will vote the other way. Is there nobody who's going to vote on based on issues like the economy, like foreign affairs, and so on? Now, in our own country, we've seen that when you vote, when you base your entire case based on religion or community, it doesn't work very well. So, does that mean that the average Indian voter is actually smarter than the American?
Okay, so there's many things. I have been trying to say exactly the reverse of what you just said I said. I've been trying to say that we can no longer say that just because you're black, that you're going to vote in this way, or just because you're Latino, you're going to vote this way. I'm trying to say that it used to be like that with the Obama coalition. I think it's changing, except for black women. That just solidly Democrat, right? But I think the region matters. And on issues, this is very interesting to me. So you would think that immigration is a big issue for Latinos, right? It's not. And I don't know what's going to happen with the latest ones, but so far, most Americans, if you ask them, what are big issues? It's what you said. It's the economy. They say jobs. You know what else they say? The price of milk, gas prices. Yes, yes. And the Chinese don't like that, right? But bracketing that aside, I think economic issues are topmost on their minds, on people's minds. And so no matter what the jobs numbers are, I think people look at prices. People think of inflation, right? People think of student loans. And Biden, and I don't know what is wrong with the Biden administration's strategic communication department, but I mean, if I were the president, and I won't be, but if I were the president, I would milk this. He's like Mr. Student Loan. That's an economic issue, right? And so people actually vote on economic issues, but it's underwritten by this other idea that, oh, we don't do that. There is a tie. Our community historically is tied with the civil rights movement and things like that. So it's very complicated. This is what I was trying to say. You should stay miles and miles and miles away from anyone who tries to tell you that I actually know what's going to happen in November. Nobody knows. It's all up in the air right now.
Thank you for the talk. So, kind of zooming out a little, 08 election seemed just a while back, right? It felt like a very seminal moment and very hopeful and all of that. And just a decade and a half in, we are in this race of, it's almost a one-eyed man in the land of the blind kind of an election to 80-year-olds, and you're just looking at the least thing. And what has shifted, according to you, in the last 15 years that the hopefulness, the landscape has changed so much, it's almost become a very despondent kind of thing. The second question was related to the earlier gentleman's thing. Even with our own country, right? How much of a factor do you think the whole cult of personality or the force of personality thing is vis-a-vis actual policy or actual issues like the economy or jobs or whatever? So, like to hear your thoughts on the same. Thank you.
I don't understand the second question.
So just trying to understand, especially with Trump, how much of a factor do you think cult of personality is versus actual relevance on issues, right? Especially when people on social media are prone to snippets rather than actual, detailed insight or discussion.
Right. Okay, so what's changed? That hopefulness stuff from 08, that's not common. So what you're seeing now is, I wouldn't call it change so much as the status quo. That was the blip. The Obama 08 stuff was the blip. Like where white people are saying we're going to vote Democrat, like across class positions, that was the blip. What has really changed, structurally what has changed is algorithms. That's what's changed. We live more in bubbles now than we used to, and we don't see visually. Cable TV is gone. We only watch streaming TV. Segregated news outlets. We used to think Fox News was far right. No, I mean, it looks moderate these days, right? People are looking at like Newsmax, OAN, things like that. So it's fringe. So the more fringification has happened, and this was not like this in 2008. I mean, like I have a vivid memory of 2008, right? So that's a major change. Like it's become more niche, more segregated, more fringified, and more sort of algorithmic. So that's huge, I think. The Second thing about cult of personality, that's a metaphysical question. I think that human beings we are drawn to leaders. We are drawn to people who are charismatic, who speak well. We just are. And so monarchies lasted as long as they did and still do for a reason. That seems to be the quite natural for people to look for leaders. Now, do we have leaders right now? Well, I think there is some kind of cult of personality with Trump, but I wouldn't say that. Well, two things about this. First of all, if Trump has cult of personality, so did Obama. Just because the word cult is being used doesn't mean it's somehow bad. It is people used to look up to Obama. People look up to Trump. But here's the thing. Not everyone who supports Trump looks up to Trump. And I know this because I taught for 11 years in a congressional district where Trump won in a landslide. In fact, it was the highest lead. I'm talking about Staten Island in New York. And I talked to many, many, many Trump-supporting students. And I know that ordinary people, whether it's this country or that, you can't fool them. They know what's going on. So the number of people who are Trump supporters that I've talked to who are like, I know. But what they want is for Trump to say the things he says, and then they want to turn around and look at the liberals. They want to see the faces of the liberals, And I identified this what I would call a problem in 2016. Now there is a phrase for it. It's called owning the libs. When you are getting some pleasure out of owning the libs, that's not personality. That's not about Trump being charismatic. That's weaponizing Trump to get some other that's being consequentialist, right? So there is cult of personality and there isn't. It's hard to make sweeping generalizations, I think.
An extension of the same point, has left kind of gone far left and making independence go right? Right, that seems to be the bigger change, at least from reading the news. A lot of people who were supporters of the Democratic, who are kind of close to the center, have been now pushed to, like how you mentioned, close their nose and vote for Trump.
Yeah, no, yes, except here's the thing. I know at least one person in this room who self-identifies as a Marxist, and they will not necessarily agree that the left has gone left. They would say that the phenomenon you're describing as the left has gone left, they would say that left has gone berserk, is what they would say. They have not become Marxist, yeah? So, they haven't moved toward the Marxist left. So I'm just saying, just clarifying that. But yes, I know precisely what you mean, though. As the left has gone what it thinks is toward the left, the moderates have moved to the right. It's soured the moderates, that has happened. But so here's the thing. The right has also moved to the right. If that is true, why isn't the moderate right becoming left? I'm not sure that's going on. The other things, I personally, this is not about you, I personally don't believe there are independents. I think you scratch the surface, you find out they're not actually, they lean one way or the other. So the group that went to the right because the left has gone super left were actually kind of right to begin with, I think. And the reverse. Yeah, because, go ahead.
Sorry, like the people who voted for Obama.
Yeah.
Right. Who were maybe right-leaning but voted for Obama.
Yeah.
Right. So people who were right-leaning who voted for Obama have now soured.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, maybe a couple of issues like on the transgender side, on the crime side, on the immigration side.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, these are issues that seems to be more dangerous for some people.
Yeah.
In the longer run.
Yeah.
Or even like the whole censorship side,
Yeah.
right? Then you say, hey, this is not a good idea to, repeat Biden. I'm better off,
Yeah.
putting a break on this.
Yeah. but they were not Democrats to begin with. Also, I wouldn't necessarily call Obama left. So there is also that.
Yeah, good evening. See, my question is, what is weighing on the American Indian community? What is there in their mind when they go to vote this time? And my second question is, will they really make a change in do they have the ability to make a change in elections?
So the answer to the second question is no. There's just not that many of us. So as a demographic, we can't change the elections one way or the other. And the first question, I don't know. I have no idea. What is the American community thinking when they're going to? Because, if it was a Kamala Harris nomination, then it would be different. I'm not sure. First of all, I don't think the Indian American community is suddenly becoming like Republican. I think they are still Democrat. But precisely how I know what they did do though. In the Republican primaries, if they were self-identified Republicans, or if it was an open primary, they voted for Nikki Haley. That they did. That I can sort of figure out. Although I don't have evidence, but I'm sure they did. But what they will be thinking in November when they vote, I don't know. I just don't know. I think they're going to do what they've always done, vote Democrat. Most of them anyway.
I haven't really understood the purpose of tracking and following the popular vote in the American system. What is the purpose of it?
I haven't the foggiest idea. Because it doesn't matter, right? And I have so many students saying we should get rid of the electoral college, and I'm like, yes, good luck with that. The other thing is, do you really want populism? It looks nice today. Yeah? We all know, right? So I'm not a fan of these kinds of ideas that, if we get well, first of all, if you get rid of the electoral college, you're going to have a Democratic president because most people live on the coasts. So at least in the near future, you're going to have it, and so it's dead on arrival. We're not going to have a constitutional amendment to fix this. And this obsession with the popular vote, I don't know. It's a powerful question. I have no idea why people are interested. I think just to signal maybe that so many people want the Democrats today, maybe 10 years from now, I don't know. Stuff changes. I grew up here, right?
Yeah, hi. So this is regarding the AI bill that is going on in California, I think.
I have no idea.
Okay.
So go ahead and ask the question. I'll
Yeah,
say I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I work in tech, so I was thinking it's not really fixed. They're not, but they're still, trying to bring in regulations, too many regulations, and trying to get a stranglehold on the open source community. Like open source is like it's available for everyone, but it's the Democrats who are saying instead of just like there's actually the extreme end of accelerationism without any consequences, but there's also the moderate thing of be responsible, but take tech as the first step to solve your problems. But Democrats are like, let's put the regulations first, let's slow down the development, and then they're trying to get it in bureaucracy. Whatever, that's what the bill is. I've read the bill with a lawyer. He decoded for me. So do you think like everything is involved, like Altman, Musk, they're all because they funded I think Bezos or something, he funded some of Trump's election, not directly, but to get in a meeting or something. I read something about 120 million something. So how do you think the tech giants will influence the coming, especially in the light?
I do know.
Yeah,
they're going to put a lot of money for the Democratic Party. Silicon Valley is very, very liberal on social issues. I don't know about AI, but I know that if you're asking me if they're Democrat or Republican, tech is Democrat. And this is funny because it's, the richer you are, you tend to be like Republican, but I think that's more about people who are small business owners and things like that. I know for a fact like Meta or Alphabet, like, Google, they put in lots of money. So Jeff Bezos and his former wife put a lot of money into the marriage equality campaign, for example. When Trump said he was going to end deferred action for childhood arrivals, which is DACA, which is unauthorized migrant children. That Facebook, Amazon, they all came out. And I told my students at the time, you know, something's wrong with the world when Facebook and Amazon are saying the same thing as Bernie Sanders is saying. So it's like, okay, weird, but yeah, this is what was happening. So yes, that is, I know for a fact that it's the people who give money to Trump's campaign are corporations of other kinds. If I'm not mistaken, I know this is being recorded, and I hope I'm not wrong. I think corporations like Lowe's, Chick-fil-A, the Home Depot, they put lots of money in. Maybe PayPal, I don't know. But tech, like Silicon Valley, no. They tend to be Democrat. They're kind of socially liberal. And fiscally, they're kind of not like, I mean, the Wall Street Journal types also are often quite socially liberal. So, yeah. But I don't know anything about the AI stuff you're talking about.
Yeah, just so I'm aware, I mean, I keep up with a good amount of sources, but is there anything you'd say is particularly accurate? Any list of look at these things for like a somewhat overarching picture? Is there anything you specifically could rely on to say that, okay, read these 10 sources and you've probably got like an answer to
So it depends on what you're looking for. So
Okay.
if you're looking for polling data, then the Pew Research is very, very good.
Okay.
Because most of the stuff I have here is from the Pew Research thing. It's the Pew Research Trust, or Gallup, obviously. The Times, CNN, Siena poll, those kinds of polls. If you're looking for news, I'll get into trouble for saying this, but the New York Times is not the worst newspaper in the whole world. Okay. Okay. So maybe read the Times. National Public Radio is pretty good. NPR. If you want lefty stuff, look at Crooked Media.
If I want writing stuff. Good to look at both.
Text me. No, Crooked Media, The Nation, Democracy Now, things like that. MSNBC, they're quite stridently left, but yeah. Yeah. Pod Save America, those kinds of things.
So I'd seen an earlier opinion poll from Suffolk University where they asked the people to list out their concerns for what they were voting for. And threats to democracy was around, I think it ranked third. So it was economy, immigration, and then threats to democracy. So I was wondering what an American voter's perspective is on threats to democracy. Like, what do they constitute as a threat? Because for Indians, I'm pretty sure it's completely different as to what an American would think. Because for us right now in our election, I think we were thinking about whether the constitution would be changed, the co-option of the media, etc. But I'm assuming that it would be different for Americans.
What were the first two items?
Economy and immigration.
And immigration.
And then it was threats to democracy.
Okay, that's very strange. And Suffolk University is usually not this bad, but it's very strange to me that that's what's happening because.
Like methodology was like you can only select one.
Yeah, this is very strange because the thing I've seen is that the economy definitely, immigration, yes, democracy people are not thinking of. Only the anti-Trump people are saying this is going to be a threat to democracy, that he's going to kill democracy. I don't think Americans go to work in their car thinking about democracy. I just don't think this is what happens. I mean, like, I teach political science, so even I kind of tune out sometimes. Like, people are not thinking about democracy. I think people are thinking about inflation, prices of things, gas prices. They're thinking about how much does it cost to send my kid to college, and what is the kid going to earn after they get out of college? Like, what is the average median income of the graduate from this? This is what people are thinking about. They spend time thinking about what is going to happen if my daughter needs an abortion. That's what people are thinking about. So the idea that thinking about democracy is number three, it's just jaw-dropping for me. Yeah. So I'm a little suspicious about how the thing was worded, and I'd have to look at the thing before I sort of say anything else. So it's very startling. The other thing, and this is very interesting to me, if you ask people one of your top priorities, they don't say abortion. They say all these other things: immigration, economy, climate. Many people say climate. Okay, but if you tell people, well, what about particularly Republicans? If you say, well, what about abortion? People apparently, this is what I heard, they become super animated. Like they have an opinion, but they're not thinking of it as the first thing when asked, well, what is your first thing? It's interesting. I don't know why people don't, but yeah. If you ask me, I'll say Supreme Court. It's the first thing I think of. Like, what is your top priority? I'm like, court. I happen to teach con law, but that's a different matter, right? But I'm thinking about the Supreme Court. Like, what are the consequences? Who's going to be on the Senate Judiciary Committee? That's what I'm thinking of. So people are all thinking about themselves and their own realities. Nobody's thinking about democracy. I don't think anyone's thinking about democracy. But yeah, so I'm suspicious about the poll, about how they constructed the poll.
You haven't mentioned gerrymandering. Is that less of an issue nowadays, or
No,
it's
not less than a fair issue. Horrible. It's horrible. It's bad. And the court, in the Rousseau decision recently, said basically it's a political question. It's non-justiciable. If they're gerrymandering the crap out of the United States, let them do it. Basically, and it's very tricky. And I understand about separation of powers. I understand about checks and balances. I understand about deference toward a co-equal branch of government. I get that. But this court is very, very strange, and it keeps. So there's the one case coming out of Alabama, the other one from North Carolina, I think. It's everywhere. It's everywhere, and this court is very reluctant about putting brakes on it. And if you look at state legislatures, typically the gerrymandering is done by state legislatures. Some states have independent commissions that do it, but even that can be partisan, I think. Like, if you scratch the surface a little, it can be. Like, who gets appointed into those roles, etc. But the state Democrats don't control that many state legislatures, so there's that problem. Also, New York City got into trouble with this, right? Just 2 years ago, I think. Yeah. It's everywhere. It's horrible. So you're exactly right. We don't know what's going to happen. And it's correlated with the thing I was talking about, residential segregation, like who lives where and how a district is carved around them, all of this. Not to mention majority-minority districts, like racial gerrymandering, right? So, and now the court is saying racial gerrymandering is a violation of the 14th Amendment. You can't consider race as a factor. Race, the way not to be racially discriminatory is to not be racially discriminatory. Yeah.
And on that note, I'd like to call a close to this evening and thank Professor Ghosh for his presentation and his candor, and thanks to all of you for your questions. I'd also like to express our gratitude to Atrey Majumdar, who's sitting there at the back, for introducing us to Professor Ghosh. Thank you, all of you. Have a safe ride back home.
Thanks, Sandhya. Thank you. You guys are